Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Hope you all are doing wonderful this evening. I am actually just doing a little extra stream here. As you can see by the thumbnail, the Sunday extra is what I'm calling it for now because this is pretty spontaneous. I'm just going to wait a moment and let some people kind of file into the chat. The first time doing this on a Sunday, so I have no idea if any of our regulars are going to be even available at the moment, and if any of you will show up in the chat. But if I end up just talking to myself, that's all right. I still just have some important information to get out that I'll be able to splice up and send out in podcast format later. So, yeah, this is a special Sunday stream. Some things changed in my schedule to allow me to do this extra stream. So here we are. Hope you guys are having a fantastic week. Great end of your weekend. I appreciate you spending it with me wherever you may be listening. So wanted to talk about some unfortunate news that I feel like needs to be highlighted. Because this is news that affects, of course, the state of Tennessee, as well as the Nashville area, and, of course, the country as a whole. It does have to do with the open border. So before we get into it, though, thank you and for joining us. This is Forge and Anvil, where we hammer out uncomfortable conversations to sharpen ourselves for the race set before us. Many of these conversations are usually theological, political, cultural in context. So thanks so much for being here. Let's go ahead and get into this. So this is from the Tennessee Conservative News. Twice deported illegal alien charged with 2 separate murders in the same week in Nashville. A man who was discovered to be a twice deported Honduran national has been charged with 2 separate murders in Nashville this week. 31-year-old Kevin Castro Garcia was charged with both the fatal shooting of Elmer Nehu Miranda Martinez and 26-year-old Brandon Rivas Norija, both of Nashville. Reports indicate that on September 27th, a burning car was found in a wooded area with the remains of a body in the trunk who had been shot. The body was identified as Martinez. There is no clear motive for the killing at the time. The following Friday, a corpse again found stuffed in the trunk of a car with multiple gunshot wounds and several tattoos cut from the victim's body was found on a piece of property inside a Ford Focus parked behind an abandoned trailer. Identified as Rivas Norieja, I'm probably pronouncing that name wrong. I do apologize to the family. The mother of the victim had reported her son missing on October 5th and said she last saw him driving her 2015 Ford Focus 2 days before reporting him missing. The alleged killer, Castro Garcia, was deported from the United States on 2 separate occasions in 2010 and 2018, according to the reports. I'm going to pause there for a moment. So, obviously, this story is horrible. It's horrible to think that there are murderers in our country, whether they be illegal immigrants or citizens. Obviously, just criminality as a whole is an unfortunate reality that we have to live with in a fallen world. What's really unfortunate, though, is that this is a very avoidable situation. This is obviously due to the open border policy that is pretty much championed by the Democratic Party at this point. They don't always necessarily advertise that it's an open border for all to come, but we all know that they do things to incentivize illegal immigrants to come across our border. We've had multiple conversations on the podcast with multiple experts on this subject, one of which, though, is Mark Krikorian. And if you haven't watched that episode, I definitely recommend going back and watching it. Obviously, we typically cover like the weekly news cycle, so some of that is going to be old news, but the content of what we're talking about is definitely evergreen in nature, and I recommend listening to that because Mark Krikorian, he really knows what he's doing. He's been on the forefront of the illegal immigration crisis for years and years, and he had a lot of great stuff to say about that. So highly recommend going back and checking out that episode if you are interested. But what I want to get at here is, first and foremost, I think it's important that we highlight stories like this because it's super easy to live in a state like Tennessee or Iowa or Illinois or wherever you might be in the great United States. it's easy to not think of the open border on a daily basis because you don't think it affects you. But unfortunately, it does affect you, as you can see here. So the reality is, every state has become a border state, and it's unfortunate that we have to deal with it and that we have to live this way. But that is just our reality. Every state is a border state. There are illegal immigrants that are coming from the border directly into the homeland of the U.S. And of course, there are some Republican governors who thought it was a wonderful moment to own the libs by sending some illegal immigrants further inward in order to prove a point. DeSantis was kind of the first one to do this, sending a bunch of illegal immigrants over to Martha's Vineyard, which, of course, they were immediately deported from Martha's Vineyard, not from the country, but from Martha's Vineyard. And of course, that proved so much hypocrisy for such a left-leaning area of the country, and of course, a really well-off economically area of the country, to immediately deport these foreign individuals because they didn't want them there. Obviously, that highlighted some hypocrisy, and that was great for a political sake that Ron DeSantis did that. And of course, Greg Abbott was doing some of that as well. But long term, it's unfortunate that sending illegal immigrants further into the country is considered the own. The reality is we need to be sending these people out of the U.S. And it's not because we don't have a heart. I mean, I can see some people are going to already freak out about what I'm saying here and immediately think that I'm being racist or selfish or not very Christ-like for not welcoming in foreigners into our country. The reality is I have no issue with people coming legally. Now, I think there's a case to be made that we have too much legal immigration, even mostly just because it takes time for a culture to build. It takes time for people to actually find themselves adjusted to the American way of living. And we don't want a bunch of people with completely different worldviews to constantly flow into our country. And that really does make a mess of things. Back in the day, America used to be called the melting pot. And a melting pot really implies that cultures are going to come and mesh together and blend into something new, which was the American way of living. Nowadays, though, we are really seeing a lot of tribalism take place with so many people coming from different backgrounds and not adjusting to the American way of living before they come here. Then, of course, to go back to the illegal immigration itself, we want to make sure that people who come here are not doing it where the first thing that they do in this country is break our laws. And of course, one of the unfortunate things, and this is where, President Trump, love him or hate him, he got blasted for saying they're not sending their best folks, right? He said that about Mexico and other countries sending people over the border. And what he means by that is the reality is a lot of these countries will actually empty out their prisons because the prison system is an expensive thing to take care of in a country. And that takes budget away from other things that, politicians may want to get done in their terms. And so they'll oftentimes empty out their prisons and send them up to the U.S. So quite literally, we do have illegal immigrants that are coming here that are criminals. And I'm going to show that with the rest of this article here. Let's see here. So again, this is also Castro Garcia was deported twice. So also, it's not exactly like you deport someone once that they won't come back. So to my point earlier about deporting people, we need to deport people and, of course, have a permanent solution for border security in place. Of course, build the wall, make sure that we have armed guards. We need to actually make sure that we protect our border. It's funny how we're always okay with Ukraine protecting their border or Israel protecting their border or Palestine protecting their border, wherever you fall on that issue. I try to stay out of it all as a whole, just because I wouldn't say foreign conflict is my specialty by any means. But either way, it's funny how we're okay with other countries defending their borders, but not us. So that's just a hypocrisy that frustrates me to no end. But let's continue on here. Since 2020, crimes committed by those who have entered the U.S. illegally has skyrocketed, as demonstrated by the chart below. Also evident in the chart, which shows arrest of individuals with criminal convictions, that from fiscal year 2017 through fiscal year 2020, the number of arrests of convicted criminals at our border steadily decreased from 8,531 to 2,469. You can find that information referenced here, and then there's a link for you to click on if you want to go back to this article. Again, this is the Tennessee Conservative News is what I'm referencing here, and they have their own references embedded in the article. So it's interesting. So through 2017 through 2020, the number of arrests of convicted criminals steadily decreased. Who was in office during that time? I'm just going to leave that unanswered because I think you all know what I'm getting at here. Then in fiscal year 2021, when the Trump-era border policies were ended with the stroke of a pen by the Biden administration, the number of convicted criminals apprehended at the border more than quadrupled. The number has only risen from there, as we have now nearly finished 2023 with 12,659 arrests of convicted criminals at our border year to date. Total criminal convictions by type nationwide has also risen as the border becomes more permeable by the day, and policies in large urban cities, typically run by soft-on-crime Democrats, allow for the release of the most violent criminals little more than hours after their arrest. I'm sure that's a point that I don't have to drive home for many of you. Many of you have seen individuals over the last several years, whether that be during the riots of 2020 or just about any criminality that's happened in major cities since then. Many individuals will go and do minor crimes, get arrested, slap on the wrist, and nothing happens, immediately turn loose. They'll go out and do major crimes. It just seems like they constantly escalate. Nowadays, it seems like individuals can get away with murder in some of these cities. And it's just ridiculous to see. And the reality is we need leadership that actually cares about the citizens over the non-citizens. And if you want to make a case that we should bring in more people into this country, that's great. But we just got to make sure that we take care of ourselves first, because I do think that's biblical. You know, we're told to look after our own households before we can do things like serve in the church. Why is that? It's because honestly, if your household is not in order, you're not fit to serve. And that is the same with America as a country. I don't think that we should be sending a ton of help overseas while our country is in ruins. So that's a whole other point to itself. Let me see here. The illegal entry and re-entry statistics for fiscal years 2021, 2022, and 2023 are double that of the 3 years prior, and those are the people they document. It's been widely reported that upwards of 11 million illegal immigrants have crossed into our country since 2019. The legitimate question Americans find themselves asking is, why are we dealing with crimes committed by people who should never have been here to commit them in the first place? We will continue to cover this story as it develops. That is the question. Unfortunately, it's a matter of political will. I think ultimately we have many individuals in leadership who benefit from the open border policies. A lot of people ask all the time, why are they doing this? And I think there's a lot of different ways there are a lot of different reasons you can point to for why our politicians are doing this. I think when it comes to the Republican side of things, there are many in the sort of Chamber of Commerce wing of the party that just want cheap foreign labor. And they can get individuals to come here illegally that can work for pennies on the dollar compared to what you work for, especially as minimum wage is constantly rising. That's another thing. You raise the minimum wage and more individuals are going to be overlooked for illegal immigrants who may be willing to work under the table. And then, of course, when it comes to the Democratic Party, it's been shown multiple times over that individuals who come from other countries across our border illegally, typically what happens is they'll have what you call anchor babies. And many of you already know this terminology. A lot of this isn't new, but for those who don't, it just means that they have a baby in the United States. And because of a truly warped reading of the Constitution, the law as is being upheld in the states currently makes it to where if you're an illegal immigrant and you have a child here in the U.S., they are a citizen. So they are anchor babies because typically what happens is then they typically do things like take care of their family who are illegal here. And of course, those individuals eventually grow up and they vote. And when they do vote, they tend to skew heavily towards the Democratic Party because many of them come from countries that want the handouts. They're used to the handouts that the Democrats often promise their voters. And of course, the Democrats, unlike Republicans, actually follow through and give stuff to their base. So unfortunately, that is there's incentive on both sides of the political aisle to keep the gravy train of illegal immigrants coming. Beyond that, though, I really do think that there is maybe a darker motive for some individuals. I'm not about to list names because this is me talking a little bit more conspiratorial. But I really do think that there are some individuals who know what they're doing, that like the criminality, that they want crime to be rampant in the streets. They want more people to be coming across our border and causing mayhem, because ultimately chaos is good for them, especially in election years. You could point to 2020 if you need an example of chaos during an election year. Um, so much of the defund the police movement, I really think, was just meant to empower the federal police force. And of course, the federal police force, you could call that FBI, DOJ, you can call that the IRS hiring 87,000 new IRS agents, many of which are going to be carrying lethal weapons. Don't know why, right? See where I'm going at? Anyways, I do think that there is a conspiratorial element to me that really believes that it's intentional to really degrade the safety of our nation, so that people will start clamoring for a heavier police state. And of course, many of the local police have been defunded since 2020 and the whole defund the police movement. Now, obviously, some locales have done things to protect that. That's why you need to get involved locally. You need to make sure that your county and your city has a well-funded, well-regulated police force that also has high accountability. Because, of course, we also see many police officers will just do as they're told, and they will arrest people for opening their shop during a unconstitutional lockdown, right? So obviously we need to make sure that there's accountability within our police force. But the best type of police force is a local police force where you know the sheriff, you know the officers, because they're your neighbors. They're people that go to church with you. They're people that you grew up with, that you went to high school with. But ultimately, what happens is so many of these cities, first of all, cities get too big. That's already a challenge in itself to keep things localized. But then, of course, in even small towns that have police defunded due to the craziness of 2020 and beyond, many of those individuals are now, there's a void that needs to be filled. And where are they going to fill that void? Usually by having someone from out of the area come and fill that void, whether that be another federal agency or whether that be a state agency that's just from a completely different town. And ultimately, when your police officers don't know you, there's a whole lot less willingness to understand. There's a lot. There's a lot more trust issues, I guess, is the concise way of putting it. Anyways, we got to make sure that we highlight these stories, because there are 2 people who are dead in Nashville right now because of an illegal immigrant that was deported twice. Apparently had no problem coming back over the border. And who knows, maybe he'll get a slap on the wrist and he'll be released the next day. I don't know. He might already be released. Who knows? It's hard to say. Only time will tell. Hopefully he won't commit more crimes. Hopefully we won't find more people murdered in the Nashville area or the greater Tennessee area or anywhere for that matter. But unfortunately, these are stories that are going to become more and more commonplace if something isn't done about it. So make sure that you get involved on the local level. Make sure that you are calling your representatives on the national level. Tell them to close the border, fund border security. Make sure that you are doing your part to make sure that your community is safe. Get to know your neighbors. Honestly, that's something that's not hammered in enough too. Get to know your neighbors. We had C.R. Wiley on the podcast a long time back. It's been several months now since we had him on for the very first time. One of the things that he said is, when the world falls apart, beans, bullets, and bunkers is not the thing that's going to ultimately save you. It's going to be a close-knit, high-trust community. And so make sure that you're forging that now. Move closer to family that you trust or friends that you trust if you don't have anyone near you. And for those of you who just have people near you, but you've never bothered to get to know your neighbor, try to get to know them. Go knock on the door, introduce yourself, start building a relationship. Obviously, be safe. I don't know what kind of area you live in, but if you can build trust with your neighbors, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to have individuals who you can rely upon when craziness keeps happening. Because unfortunately, I think these stories are only going to trend upwards until something drastic happens. And I don't know if it ever will. So be prepared, be safe, be alert, and ultimately keep praying for the soul of our nation. Pray that God really revives his people and that people will repent and turn towards him and declare that Christ is Lord. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you. This is a short little extra episode. I really appreciate you guys joining me. Feel free to join us sometime on a Monday night. That's when we usually go live. This was a Sunday extra. Like I said, some stuff in my schedule cleared up, but this is not the norm. I don't typically do Sundays, but I think I will be doing a few more going forward now. So there's not going to be any real consistent schedule for a little while with Sundays. So we'll just keep calling it the Sunday extra for now. But hopefully you can join us for a future Sunday. And feel free to share this video out with your friends. Join us tomorrow. I have Dear Woke Christian is coming back on the podcast to join me and Michael as we interview Kathy Barnett, who ran for Senate in Pennsylvania against Dr. Oz. Many of you may have seen her very contentious primary against Dr. Oz. And now she is a part of Team Vivek Ramaswamy 2024. So we're going to be asking her all about Vivek, asking her some questions about how she got involved and what she really thinks of him and what he's like. So be sure to join us. That will be tomorrow night, Monday. That'll be October 23rd, 8 p.m. Central Time, live on YouTube and Rumble. You can join us in the chats. We are live on Twitter as well, but we do not take chats on Twitter. I don't think there's even a chat function yet. But either way, join us sometime, and we'll be sure to save you a seat. So thanks so much for watching. Until next time.